Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. I'm David Jones. I do this every Friday normally at 2:30 UK time in the afternoon. If you've never attended one before, how this works is we'll look at some of the major announcements that are due out next week. Then I'll go back onto the markets, onto the charts, take a look at what's been happening over the last week. It feels like a bit of a slow week this week. I don't know how it's been for you. But if you look at something like the S&P, for example, is trading pretty much where it was when we did this last week. So it does feel like it's not been perhaps the most exciting week, but we'll go back and do a catch up with what's been going on. And then look at where the opportunities might be for the week after, for next week. And as usual, if there are any markets that you want looking at, if you put it in the chat, we'll take a look at it. And see. So it runs for typically up to an hour. If we finish before that, we finish before that. But I've got an hour. Let's just get some of the housekeeping stuff done and out of the way, and then we can get cracking. So this presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, so it's been a relatively quiet week this week, I think, for news. We had that UK inflation out, didn't we, this week? Inflation clearly still a hot topic for markets. You know, what are central banks going to do with interest rates and all of that? So looking ahead to next week, on Wednesday, I think the early hours of Wednesday, we've got the Australian inflation data, consumer inflation. Then on Thursday, probably the big one for next week, US GDP. So how well or not is the US economy doing? So that comes out on Thursday. We've got Japanese inflation data on Thursday as well. And then on Friday, EU GDP. So no massive news next week. That US GDP, like I say, is probably going to be the big one to watch. So that's on Thursday of next week. And it's still going to be April, isn't it? So it's not going to be the payrolls or anything. So that's next week in market. So for me, Thursday is probably the big one to watch. A quick word from the sponsor, which is me. Just a quick mention for the trading course that I run. There are two courses within one course. Effectively, there's a medium-term trading that covers trading over weeks and months, which is still, I think, my preferred way of trading because it's low maintenance. There are 11 video lessons on that. There's shorter-term trading, hours and days, so holding a position for a few days, perhaps a bit longer. I've got 4 short-term trades I opened this week up, and I'm still in them because the markets have been quite quiet. But the shorter-term trading approach is in there as well. There are live webinars, you get different number of live webinars depending on which part of the course you take. And there's a WhatsApp group that I run for those people on the course that where I update every day the stuff I'm looking at. So it's not trading tips, but it's a couple of markets every day that I think might be interesting. A quick reminder, I openly traded an account from November to Jan last year. You can see all of this on the website, but the account made, this was as of there were still some open trades, I think, but closed trades as of the 31st of Jan, just under 2,200 on a £4,000 account. So you can read a bit more about the story and see all of the trades on that if you go to the website. Trustpilot reviews, 5-star Trustpilot reviews. So thanks very much to everybody who did that, who's been on the course. And also there's a newsletter. I've started doing a newsletter free of charge every weekend. This weekend's might be a bit late. And it's a look ahead to next week. What am I trading? A trading tip and stuff like that. So basically for all of this stuff, if you go to my website, and I've sort of revamped the website a bit. If you go to davidjonestrading.co.uk, I'll put the link in the description. If you're not on the newsletter, if you scroll down on the homepage, you can put your address in there. and subscribe to the newsletter. And then all the other stuff, obviously you can access from here. You can see the performance, a bit more about that trading I did, the breakdown of all the trades, all of that sort of stuff. You can see in there the various courses, which broker I use. I did, it's often it's a common question. So I recorded a few weeks ago now, a short 10-minute video on why I use the broker I use. So that's in there as well. So that's it. So that's the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. Okay. And I should say, actually, as it's the new financial year for me, I've done a promotion to the end of April. If you use the code April20, all one word or collection of digits, then you get 20% off any of the courses before the end of the month. Let's see. So there you go. Okay, so go to the website and all of the information is there. Right. What's next? What are we doing? Markets. Let's have a look. I can see, I've got a comment on Chris's comment. I opened a demo account and placed there the opposite trade of what I placed to my real account. The way things are going, I'll be very rich in my demo account soon. It's quite interesting take. I mean, I'm not a fan of demo accounts, but I think it's a really good point that Chris made there. If you have a strategy that's really bad, that loses all the time, then you've got potentially a good strategy there, haven't you? You just take the opposite, go in the opposite direction to what you think you might be doing, and you might have the beginnings of a profitable strategy. But no, I think it's been a tough couple of weeks though anyway, because markets have been quite slow. My best trade at the moment I'm in, just to slightly go off tangent straight away, is the FTSE. I bought the FTSE on Monday. I think it was Monday or Tuesday of this week, or maybe even Wednesday, maybe it was Wednesday, whenever, but down here somewhere at 78.80 something or 78 something, and it just bobbled around all week, and it's got a bit of a move on today, but even that's come back, and it just has been a bit of a slow week, I think, this week. I bought natural gas. I did the natural gas video yesterday, so I'm long natural gas, and again, I mean, I've only been in it for a day, it hasn't really gone anywhere. So there's quite a few markets. I'm short euro, which has gone back to where I got short. So it has been a bit of a dead week, but thanks for that, Chris, on the demo account approach. Anyway, let's get into it and look at the the markets properly. So like I say, it has been a bit quiet, but let's see if we can find something interesting. So stock markets, as usual, we'll start with the S&P. It's not moved much over the last week. It did hit though, actually on Tuesday of this week. It hit a new high for this little recovery from the middle of March. My position on stock markets is the same as it's been for a while now. I think the correction is over. It's trying to build a recovery. It's not going anywhere fast. I'm a buyer of the dip from a more medium-term point of view on stock markets like the S&P 500. So not a very exciting week, but if there was a sell-off, I'd be a buyer of the dip on the S&P. And that's about all I've got to say about that one. Same for the Nasdaq. There's the trend line from last week on the Nasdaq. We had this big sell-off in tech stocks from November 2021. Sells off, builds a base from October through to December. And we've got again a recovery building. We saw the Nasdaq earlier this month trade to its best levels since about August last year. So for me, I would still be a buyer of dips on the Nasdaq. I do have a medium-term Nasdaq long position that I'm quite happy to run. But again, not the most exciting week. We're back. I mean, not the most exciting couple of weeks really. Excuse me, for the Nasdaq. Pretty flat so far. So nothing too exciting there. DAX, bit of volatility in the DAX. The last couple of days, here we go, if I flip it over to an hourly. It was a reasonable, if you were a bit nimble, a reasonable trade. Someone on the WhatsApp group asked about it yesterday when it broke down to sort of 15,760. It's a reasonable trade there. It did flip back down again early this morning and it's bounced back. But medium term, trend is still up. The trend since October last year in the DAX is up. For me, I'm long the DAX, medium-term trade on the DAX, and I'm happy to stick with it. If I have to come up with a target, I'm not a fan of targets, but if I came up for a target, I'd be looking, first of all, at a run back to those. I think they're the all-time highs, aren't they? Yeah, probably. The all-time highs from November 2021, around 16,300, something like that. So for me, still a buy of the dip on the DAX, really. So again, not too exciting. FTSE, I mean, the FTSE is trying, you know. Let's just get these lines off for a start. So the FTSE, at least today, it has made a new high for this rally that's been going on for about a month now. So that looks all right. You know, my target is a run back up to these 16th of Feb highs, 8,050, only 100 or so points higher than where we are now. It's been a nice trend, that FTSE. I've caught a couple of bits of that FTSE trend, but that's been a really good trend in the FTSE, going back to whenever it is, end of March, third week of March. You know, we just sort of chugged our way up. It's had a little try to fall out the trend line, but it's, for me, that trend is still going, because it hit a new high today, a new recovery high today. So I'm long the FTSE. Let's see what happens. But again, you know, not the most exciting of weeks for the FTSE 100. What should we do next? So that's it. Stock market still bullish. Nothing too crazy though. I'm going to let's talk about natural gas. All right, I did this video yesterday on natural gas. Natural gas is very popular on my YouTube channel. It's about 10 times as many views, I think, or maybe 5 times as many views as anything else. So it's a really hot market amongst retail traders, or it has become a hot market. I don't think it was a very hot market 2 years ago. And I think the reason it is hot is because the price has collapsed, you know, and we've talked about client sentiment before and about everyone trying to buy the bottom all the way down. So I did a video yesterday. You can watch it if you haven't seen it. Watch it later. But I thought it was interesting. I bought natural gas yesterday, and I thought the price action has been interesting because, absolutely, if you look at the big trend for natural gas going back to whenever it is, August of last year, that trend is still down. Okay, so we might get a little wiggle higher, but the trend is still down. And for me, I think I said in the video yesterday, until it breaks, at the very least, the early March high around about $3, 297 to 3, I think it's difficult to say we've seen an important bottom. Okay, so I'd still be a little bit wary about calling it an absolute bottom for natural gas. But what I thought was interesting, the reason I bought it yesterday, was what happened on Friday. So this time last week. So we'd seen natural gas. If I just scroll back a bit to the beginning of April. So natural gas, you know, we'd have rallies along the way. They'd get slammed. The market would move lower. You know, we all know, if we've watched it, what natural gas has done in recent months. And it hit a low in whenever it was, Thursday the 6th of April. Then we saw, you know, quite a strong rally up to 215, 217. Bang, gets slammed again. Last Friday, so this time last week, pretty much, or between 12 and 1 o'clock last week, falls to a new low. Bearish, but we had this really strong rally. So this rally this week takes out the previous highs as well, whatever they were, 217 or something. And pushes up to 234 and sells off. So I do wonder, the reason I did the trade, I just wonder in the short term, I'm not saying this is the absolute bottom, but is this an important interim bottom for natural gas? So I put the trade on yesterday. Let's see. So I think it's interesting. I've got a stop loss on the trade, obviously. Not much progress since it's gone on, but quite by natural gas's standards, a half decent rally. But let's not forget, going back to here, back to Feb, there was quite the rally back then. The thing moved 50% from $2 to $3 pretty much, and still fell off a cliff afterwards. So this is why I'm a bit skeptical about trying to call an absolute bottom in natural gas. But I thought it was interesting from a short-term point of view what it was doing. Okay, but more medium term, the trend is still down. If we did get a run up to $3, it looks like a great short opportunity. Let's see what happens. And crude oil. Crude oil's been interesting. We've had some strange moves in crude oil because we had that announcement from OPEC, surprise announcement over the weekend, the first weekend in April, saying that they were going to introduce production cuts. So we saw it actually gap up. It didn't trade like this, it gapped up. And then it pushed a bit higher, but it spent much of the last week selling off. I think this is maybe an interesting market for next week, crude oil. It doesn't surprise me that it sold off, when it was bumping around 82 to 83, because we have seen this as being the top of the range. When it was banging around in that range, 82, 83 was the top, or 84, going back to December. So it's perhaps not surprising that there hasn't been the conviction to push crude oil, because it's come a long way, just since the March lows down at 64, to be trading nearly $20 higher, not even a month later. It's a 30% move in crude oil that we've seen off those lows. It's a big old move. So it's not surprising that perhaps it's sold off. But I wonder if it's going to be an interesting one for next week. If you look on the hourlies, if you drew a trend line on, we're sort of faffing around that trend line now. It'd be interesting, I think, to see what happens next week for crude. So I haven't traded it this week. It's been a nice sell-off, nice trend since last Thursday, a week yesterday, down. Made a new low for the down move today. Let's see what next week brings in crude oil. Do we have a bit of stability? Let's see what happens. So natural gas, perhaps the most interesting thing, for me anyway, that we've seen so far. We take a look at some other markets. Gold, again, just a bit of a nothing week. Let's just get rid of these lines. Look, this is gold now. This is where we are. And this is where we were a week ago, that big sell-off a week ago. And it's just stabilised since then. I would say the same thing that I've said for a few weeks. I'm surprised that gold is as high as it is. I can't draw the lines, but we're back up near all-time highs, $2,070, $2,075 an ounce. And I think, clearly a dollar weakness story is behind that. If you wanted to go short gold, I think, as I said last week, then it's the perfect place to go short, with stops above the old highs, and that's it. It's just a bit. It's had a great run up, but I do wonder if we've seen the best for gold for perhaps some time. Let's see. I would absolutely change my opinion if it blasted through $2,075 an ounce, and we'd have fresh all-time highs then for gold. But it's just, again, I'm not quite sure how it's managed to get up so high. So I'd be tempted to see it not crash, but drift a bit lower from where we are now. And perhaps there's an opportunity if that happens. If we go back to the shorter term chart, there was a lot of support in the mid 1900s for gold, around 1940, 1950. It's currently trading at 1987. So if we did see it under some pressure next week, perhaps there is an opportunity there. Let's see. I'm sort of mildly bearish, I suppose, on gold where we are now. Take a look at silver. Silver had a good run, and if we did some traditional technical analysis, it had been in this downtrend since whenever that was, 2021, 2 years, and it's broken out of it over the last couple of weeks or so. Again, not much movement over the last week. Arguably, from a short-term point of view, we've seen 24 to 24.5 be good support on silver. So arguably still a buy of the dip, but just not the most exciting week so far for silver. So not too much for me to get excited about on that one. The dollar index, if you take a look at some currencies, the dollar index, always an interesting one to look at. Whenever I look at currencies, I always start with the dollar index. So the dollar index, again, it's been a bit of a nothing week. So what was interesting was last Friday, I put this in the newsletter. So on Friday of last week, this green candle down here, let me zoom it in a bit again. It came back to the lows from early Feb, actually the lows for the year for the dollar index. And off these lows back in Feb, we saw a reasonable move. We saw like a 4%, 5% move, whatever it was for the dollar index. Sells off, lo and behold, that's the level that's held over the last week. And I do wonder, if you absolutely thought, well, the dollar has been beaten up enough since September of last year, then if there's ever a place to buy, I think this is down here is an interesting one. If I was a buyer down here, I am short the dollar index actually, I should say. But if I was a buyer down here, then my stop would go the other side of 100.85, that recent low. So again, the fact it's held is positive. Arguably, we've still got a bit of a downtrend going on from those highs in March, you could say. We've got lower highs and lower lows, even though it's gone nowhere over the last week. So if it ran up towards 102, 103 in the short term, I think it's an interesting short. But from a more medium term point of view, if the dollar is going to turn around anywhere, I think this is the level to watch, really. So like I say, I'm still short. I've been short since about up here. If it rallies much from here, I'd come out of my short. If it breaks down below that low, that'd be great, and I'd add to the short. At the moment, it's been a bit inconclusive, is what I would suggest, or what I think about it up here. Let's see. If you look at some of the other currencies, euro dollar, I'm short euro dollar. Again, it's gone nowhere this week. I'm sure it's just banging around. Oh, it has. Something's happened in the last hour since 2 o'clock, but I mean, it's just doing nothing. But from a more medium-term point of view, I'd be a buyer of the dip of the euro against the dollar. We've seen this good run since September last year. Perhaps it is a bit overextended in the short term, and we could do with a euro sell-off. But it still looks like a buy the dip market to me. Pound against the dollar. I mean, we had a bit of pound news this week. Obviously, inflation. I think inflation was it slightly higher than expected? Consumer inflation in the UK. It's a tricky one, the pound. I think probably technically, I'd want to be a buyer of the dip in the pound. The question is, how far does the dip go? We did see just a week ago, we saw the pound push to its best levels since June of last year. So that's a 10-month high, pretty much. So that might be an interesting one for next week. The fact it's getting so clobbered today, relatively speaking. Let's see what happens next week. Pound against the dollar, there has been a lot of support, 123, 123.60. Let's see. But again, it just shows you the week. We've hardly moved at all on the week. And Bitcoin, I think this is an interesting market. If you've watched any of these things before over the years, I'm not a massive fan of the crazy world of crypto. But I think as a tradable thing, it's interesting. And for me, the interesting thing in Bitcoin at the moment, where does this sell-off stop? So we've seen a good recovery in Bitcoin, plenty of volatility. I would be quite tempted to buy the dip, I think. I wonder if we're going to have another look at 31,000 plus in Bitcoin. So for me, this is one I'll be looking at every day to see what happens and see if there's any strength. At the moment, it's still weak, but interesting to watch next week. We had the low on the way up was about, from the end of March, was 26,500. We're 28,000 and a bit today. Let's see what happens in Bitcoin next week. Do we see some buyers come back in? But for me, that recovery that's been going all this year in Bitcoin is still going. So let's see what the next few days bring. And that's it really, I think, for the stuff I want to look at. So we'll jump at the stuff you want to look at in a second. I don't think I've missed anything. Just a few random bits and pieces. Sugar has had quite the move. I did trade, I think I mentioned, I've traded it in bits and pieces up here. I've missed completely this latest move in sugar. But, it's been, it was 20th of March, sugar was 21 cents, I think. And today it's 25 and a bit, having been above 25.50. Big move in sugar. It's a multi-year high in sugar, breaking through the old highs up there. I thought that was an interesting market. Interesting to see if that starts to, if we get a bit of a pullback in sugar. So I thought that was worthy of a mention. But let's take a look at some of the stuff you want to have a look at. Before we do that, quick plug, of course. Go to my website to find out more and sign up for the newsletter that will go out this weekend. If you'd like to join one of the courses, davidjonestrading.co.uk is the website. April 20, if you use that in one of the voucher codes, if you join a course, you get 20% off, and that code will run for just over another week to the end of the month. Okay, and their website is there, and there's loads of stuff on the website. Who do I trade with? What does the course cover? Blah, 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 all that stuff. And a bit of a ramble from me about those performance figures and a breakdown of all the trades I did up to the end of January. But go to their website and you can see all of that there. Right, let's get into some of the stuff you would like to look at. That does still make me laugh, that demo account thing. I think that's the experience of probably a lot of people. I think it is really frustrating when it feels like you can't get anything right, and if you just did the opposite to what you're doing, you'd make money. Isn't the US in recession now? Sell everything and short all stocks. My God, that's a bit drastic, isn't it? I don't think so. I mean, for me, it's not. It was technically in a recession last year, wasn't it? But they changed the rules, so they didn't, did they? But for me, don't forget. Again, you can do if you want to sell all your stocks, knock yourself out, because who knows? But for me, I think stock markets are always looking ahead, and I think we've had the correction in markets to signal these tougher economic times that we're in. So I just googled US GDP recession. So are we in a recession yet? The report says that economic growth in 2022 US was not in recession, but Bill Adams, chief economist, believes GDP will likely slow sharply in early 2023. Well, let's see. Let's see what happens. So we had growth in the fourth quarter, according to CNBC, even as recession fears loom. So for now, at least, even though we know it is tricky out there, particularly for consumers, I don't think we're going to see a massive economic slowdown. Famous last words. And like I say, for me, I'm happy to be a buyer of the dip on stocks, on stock markets. Nvidia. Let's have a look at Nvidia. Nvidia. This is in recovery, isn't it? Technically, yes, it is. Let me just tidy this up. That's had a good run. A great run. Nvidia since October last year, $110, and here we are now at $268. We had it's a good example, actually. About how we have seen, quite a lot of stocks get absolutely battered. If you go back to Nvidia, back at the highs in November 21, it was 340, and it traded as low as 110. We saw a big correction in some of these stocks. Anyway, Nvidia, what would you do? I suppose if you really wanted to go short, I don't think I would. It hasn't done much over the last week, like most things. I'd still be a buyer of the dip. But if you really wanted to go short, you could go short with a stop above 280. But for me, clearly we've had a big run. The stock has almost doubled this year. So it would be a bit naive perhaps to expect it to double again. But I'd be quite happy to be a buyer of a dip with a stop perhaps the other side of $250. So I think it's perhaps fallen now into more of a trading range type stock rather than this great trend we had. But for me, I'd still be a buyer of the dip in Nvidia. Lots of companies have earnings releases next week. Thanks for that, Daniel. Earnings releases. Let's have a quick look. Because we've had some of the banks this week, haven't we? Some of the US banks. Did Netflix have earnings this week? I can't remember. Companies' earnings. Let's have a quick look. Who's out big next week? Oh God, there are absolutely loads next week. Okay, I can't even see who's the biggest. Okay, yeah. So hopefully a bit more volatility for stock markets off the back of that. Dollar Canada is looking good to short. Let's have a look. Dollar against the Canadian dollar. Would you? Okay. I wouldn't, but that's what makes a market. I suppose if you're looking on the short term short. It's had a good run. It's because it's run back to those old highs, isn't it? So if you wanted to go short, it is probably a good area to go short if you thought that's it was going to fall out of bed again, because you've got a good reference point for stop losses, haven't you? It's still, at the moment, it's still strong, isn't it? We are seeing a bit of a dollar run, aren't we, over the last hour or so? I'm not quite sure what news has come out. But anyway, yeah, so stops, yeah, for me, if it stops going up, then I'd think about it. On the dailies, I mean, it looks a little bit sideways, doesn't it, for the last 6 months or so. And we've been to the bottom of the range and bounced back up. It's a bit of a nothing one for me on the medium term, but interesting to see how if it can carry that momentum on through that high there. Can we have a look at NKLA? Is that the electric doodah stock, electric car? It is, isn't it? Yeah. It's just weak, isn't it? It just continues, isn't it? I did buy these at one point. I think it was here, somewhere here. I can't remember. I mean, we got downtrends all over the show, haven't we? Nikola Corporation. Great example that something has never slid so far that it can't slide a bit further. Even at 87 cents a share, the stock of Nikola, is that how you pronounce it, could still drop another 90% from here, couldn't it? And it's pretty weak. It's just been even. What did it hit? Hit $3 in Feb, and here we are at 87 cents. So it's lost 70% just over the last 2 months. Yeah, the trend is down, isn't it? So yeah, sell the rally would be my thingy-majiggy there. Can have a look at Roblox after it gaps down $6 in one day. So Roblox or Roblox, whatever it is. Oh, it's a pretty boring gap though, isn't it? I mean, I can absolutely see what you mean. Earnings, I'm guessing, is the gap, isn't it? Again, it's hindsight, but I would have bought that gap. I think it's always quite interesting to go against gaps, to take the view, are the markets overreacting? So on Friday, last week, it closed at, what did it close at? 45.70. And then it opened at $40 on Monday. I'd still be a buyer. I mean, it's pretty boring, isn't it? Pretty boring. Big range over the last, 10 months or so. In the middle of the range at the moment. We did have a nice little trend chugging away there. I wonder, does it have another look at 48, do you think? I mean, it's, if I had to do anything, I'd be a buyer rather than a seller, but it is in the middle of the range, so it's perhaps not the most exciting one out there at the moment. Sterling Aussie, GBP, AUD, British pound, Australian dollar. Looks like breaking trends. It looks like, what do you think? Yeah, it's a bit of a funny one, isn't it? I suppose if you're taking the trend from up there, I suppose that you could say, couldn't you? It's a bit scrappy, isn't it, Sterling Aussie? But I would be a buyer of, even today actually, be a buyer. I probably have to flip it over to the short-term chart, which always means there isn't really a trend there. But I mean, there absolutely is a trend in sterling against the Aussie dollar over the last 2 months, isn't there? So for me, if I was a buyer today, the closest I'd have my stop would be 184, the other side of 184, but actually probably the other side of 182.50. But it's an interesting one, that, isn't it? Sterling against the Aussie. Again, it's been a bit, I mean, look at this week, up one day, down the next, but overall, the trend is still positive, I think. Amazon, AMZM, we looked at those for ages, haven't we? Amazon, I would be a buyer of Amazon. Let's have a look. So because they've done all these share splits, isn't it? Whatever they call them in America. So they were 187 at the highs, because they used to be $2,500-3,000 a stock, didn't they? Something like that. Anyway, so they were 187 at the highs. Traded down to wherever that is, 81. And I think they're trying to recover. I would say. So I'd be a buyer of the dip in Amazon. So it'd be nice to get a dip back down, because they're 105 today. Do we get a dip back down below 100? But I'd be a relaxed buyer of Amazon. So I signed back up to Amazon Prime yesterday, so that's £7 a month they're getting. I think that's going to help boost their stock during May. But yeah, we are still recovering, bang, 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 aren't we? So I do think, for me, it looks like the worst is over for Amazon since that slide that started in November of 2021. So interesting one. Do you think Virgin Galactic can recover at all? Aren't they? I mean, they're not bankrupt, are they? But I mean, look, I mean, again, I remember I did done videos on this on the past. It's really interesting that they would really move on news. You know, so if they'd have a successful test flight over the weekend, obviously we see the stock really move and then dump back to where it was. For me, I mean, that is absolutely fruit machine investment. Yeah, it's like putting your money in a one-armed bandit and hoping it comes good. For me, the trend is down, so for me, I got no interest in something like that, to be honest. You know, and yeah, so it's not one for me. It still looks pretty weak. Trend is down. I don't know if they'll come back or not, but it wouldn't be one for me. Capital Federal, CFFN. I'm in for a short ride. Let's have a look. Capital Federal Financial. Okay. I mean, that looks like... Are you buying it? I'm guessing, so you're buying, hoping the thing's going to go up, aren't you? Again, we are now, once again, we are in the Las Vegas section of the live stream. I mean, for me, you know, it's lost $2 since early Feb, hasn't it? So it's dropped about 25%. I mean, I suppose, I mean, if I was a buyer down here, I would put a stop loss, perhaps the other side of $6, and hope they don't gap lower overnight. So that's what I would do. But again, it's not one for me because the trend has been down, since at least here, since December 2016. What are the chances? This share has been in a downtrend for 6 years. What are the chances you're picking the bottom now? That's what I would say. It's a probability question. But you never know. Someone's got to pick the bottom, haven't they? So let's see what happens. But no, it's not one for me. But good luck with it, though. Good luck with it. Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce Holdings, there we go. So it's Rolls-Royce the engine company, not Rolls-Royce the cars. Have they topped out? I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? They've sort of... I mean, for me, that trend is still up. I don't know if I'd be a buyer here. I'd rather see a sell-off. But the big trend, the recovery trend is still up, but it does, you know, constantly sort of disappoint Rolls-Royce, doesn't it? It gets a bit of a move on, and then it stalls again, it turns lower. So, interesting, though. Be interesting to come back to it if they dropped about 10%, 7 or 10%, I think. Glencore, the commodities company thingy. What would you do? It's a tricky one, that. I don't know. I suppose someone could argue, well, the trend is still down, even though it's broken out of the last week. You know, someone could still argue, well, the correction is still going on from up here until it breaks 530. I would probably sit on my hands if we get a sell-off and it could see a bit of strength. Perhaps it looks interesting then. But, yeah. I mean, you know, absolutely, longer term, going back to the last 2.5 years, the trend is up, isn't it? So I'd probably rather be a buyer of a dip than a seller of the strength. But I'd probably rather wait it out a bit on that one and see. Copper, sideways or fall? I think it's been a bit of a mixed market, copper, in recent... There you go, yeah, it has. I don't know. I think there's an argument for being a buyer, because absolutely, the trend since July last year is up. But, you know, over the last couple of months or so, it cannot get through 417, 421. There was someone last week who was short copper, wasn't it, in the live stream? So at least the last week's been all right for them. So for me, it's a bit of a nothing market again. I'd probably rather be a buyer, but I'd also rather wait to be a buyer. And do we get a push back to maybe 375 or something? It's just a bit boring, I think, at the moment. The old copper. QQQ. I mean, QQQ is the Nasdaq. It's the same stuff. We looked at Sterling Aussie, didn't we? We looked at that. Nat gas sitting right on its hourly 50 moving average. I never look at moving averages, but okay, take your word for it on that. That's not moved up either, is it? What is actually moving this afternoon? So the dollar is definitely, the dollar is moving. What's the news then? Dollar slips. No, nothing. Aussie yen. Did we look at Aussie yen? I can't remember. Aussie yen. Let's have a look on the dailies. Doing a lot of FX today, aren't we? That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, what would you say? You could absolutely say, oh, it's in a downtrend, and it is in a downtrend. You know, we've got lower lows. So you treat, one way would be to treat this rally we've had since the 24th of March as an oversold rally and go short. And go short, for me, the most aggressive stop would be above the high from yesterday, above 91. To be honest, I'd probably rather wait and see what happens on Monday. Seen a bit of a weird move today. Let's see what happens on Monday. But absolutely, that trend in Aussie yen is still down. Euro Aussie. It's a lot of Aussie action today. Euro against the Aussie dollar. How are we doing for time? We're doing all right. Oh, that's good, isn't it? So that is... Where's that going then? So Euro. I would be a buyer of that one. So we had this run that's been going since last summer. Is still going. We're breaking some big levels, aren't we? If I was a buyer today, the closest I would put my stop is the other side of 160. Should we do that and see how it turns out? Let me see. Let me see if I can find that market. Aussie yen. I think I've got enough money in this account. Not Aussie yen. So you nearly traded the wrong market then. Euro Aussie. Let's do that trade. I quite like that. Interesting one to run into next week. Euro Aussie. What am I saying? I'm going to give it a bit of room. I'm going to go 160 for a stop. I don't know if I've got enough money in the account to do that. Let's see. 1.6 for a stop. I've got to buy a minimum of 1,000. How much will be a risk? This is my money that we're risking here, not just this 50 quid. I'm not going to go crazy. There we go. That'll do. So I'm going to buy them at 163.70. I'm buying because I quite like this trend. It's hooked up today. 1.6 is the closest I'd have to stop. I think it's fair enough. Let's see what happens with it next week. So I'm going to buy 1,500. Stop loss at 160. The market's 163.7, whatever it is. Bang. Done. There we go. In. Let's look at the chart on here. There we go. There's my trade. And there's my stop. To find out about that broker and why I use this broker, handy opportunity for a plug, go to the website. Go to my website, davidjonestrading.co.uk, and I explain a bit more. But I quite like that. I think that's quite an interesting one, that is, to run into the next week. See if the euro strength continues. Let's see. Let's see what happens. What market was that? Euro Aussie. Aussie yen. Did I look at that? I think I'm getting confused what I've looked at and what I haven't looked at. Yes, I have looked at that. GE, General Electric. Wow, look at that. It's going to the moon. Going to the moon. So we've broken. Nice breakout there. Faffed around a bit. Great lesson to be patient. Just because we've decided it's going up or down doesn't mean the market's going to do it. That's really strong, isn't it? So I'd rather buy a pullback, but the risk is the pullback never happens. But an interesting one if we got a bit of weakness. Perhaps next week if we have a bit of volatility with these earnings next week, perhaps. But yeah, strong one. Strong move. Yeah, we looked at Bitcoin. Oh, you're selling CFFN. Yeah, my apologies. Okay, well, good luck with that. That was the little $6 stock, wasn't it? Okay. Guild. That's Gilead, isn't it? The stock. What do they do? Are they pharmaceuticals? Something like that. See, it looks. I mean, it's okay, but again, it's a bit. I mean, it has. If you're in it, it's great, isn't it? When the move happens, but it's just a bit. I think is there a massive lag on this live stream? I'm not quite sure. But for me, yeah. I mean, maybe we're going to have another run back up to 90. And we've got a nice little recovery going on, but not the most exciting one for me. Would somebody say that the... Yeah, you could say the trend is... You could go short, couldn't you? If you thought that the Gilead, whatever they're called, was going to run out of steam. It's an interesting one next week to think about going short with a stop above 88. What do you think about hedge trading Is that a viable thing to do in forex and other instruments? No. I don't actually know what you mean by hedge trading, but if you mean going long and short the same market at the same time, if that's what you mean, it's an utterly ridiculous thing to do. But if you want to expand on what you mean by hedge trading, let me know. But I have heard, I've heard it so many times over the years. Some companies, and if I had a broker, I'd absolutely let people do this. You buy pound against the dollar and you sell pound against the dollar. So you've got two opposing positions. You've paid the spread twice. You've got two lots of margin, but you've actually got no net position. If that's what you mean, then yeah, I think it's a waste of time. Because what people assume is, the one that goes massively in their favour, they'll take off the losing trade and run the winner. But it assumes you're going to take the loser off at the right moment and run the winner. So, but if I've got the wrong end of the stick, let me know. Wall Street has been wiping out trillions of dollars of options on the QQQ, and the SPY this week always knows where the big open interest is. Yeah, I think that's getting a little bit conspiracy theory for me, to be honest with you. We've not seen. Look at the S&P and the Nasdaq, and I love reading Wall Street bets on Reddit as much as the next person, and their crazy 1 day to expiry options. But you look at these market. Look at the Nasdaq and the S&P. That's not a lot of manipulation I can see over the last few days. The VIX, I never look at the VIX, which is what I always say when I look at the VIX. Volatility index, it's pretty low, isn't it? So again, suggesting markets are fairly calm. S&P, if you've never heard about the VIX before, if you Google it, the VIX is the volatility index derived from S&P 500 volatility data. How much are people paying for options? Are they cheap or expensive? Low VIX suggests an area, an element of calm in markets. It is quite low, isn't it? I never traded it because it is just because clearly something crazy happens and the market spikes up. But historically, this is a low level for the VIX. This is the lowest it's been for more than a year, the VIX down here. So that's the VIX. Another one. Someone else asking about the upcoming recession. I don't think there is going to be a recession, personally. I think we've been through tough times last year. I think stock markets, and you asked for the Dow as well, so looking at the Dow, I think stock markets have factored this in. So for me, based on what markets are doing at the moment, I'm still a buyer of dips on stock markets until it changes. But here's the Dow Jones. It's a bit like all the other markets at the moment. It's a bit dull, isn't it? So for me, I'd be a buyer of the dip, but we're sort of stuck in the middle of the range for the year so far. It did make new lows for the year, actually, the Dow in March, didn't it? So I must admit, it's a market I never look at. I always look at the S&P and the Nasdaq, but it's just in the middle. So for me, there's nothing too exciting in that one at the moment. But overall, I think that stock markets will continue to recover this year. Let's see how that bears out. So I don't, I do think the worst is behind economies. I think we've seen it. It's been and gone. But let's see how this year pans out. PMI data was released at 245 and boosted the dollar. Thanks for that. There must have been something, mustn't there? Ethereum, the other crazy crypto. Ethereum against the US dollar. A bit like Bitcoin, really. It's been recovering, hasn't it, all this year. So I'd be a buyer of the dip, personally. But not yet. Like with Bitcoin, when we looked at Bitcoin, it's still weak. So for me, it's interesting where it stops. And the same with Ethereum. Where does it stop? So I'd be a buyer of the dip. There's lots of support, 1680 to 1700, about 10% below where we are now. So let's see what happens. We did China, a little bit boring China. Not China, copper, sorry. Yeah, that hedging thing. No, I wouldn't agree with it. I wouldn't. I think with that hedging thing that you're talking about, people will just tie themselves in knots to try and avoid a loss or not get out of the position completely. I think it's more trouble than it's worth. is my expert opinion on the hedging. Do you ever trade the news with long and short positions? No, I talk about it on my trading course, but to give you a bit of a clue, I don't look at news that much. Okay, I trade. As you can see from these live streams, it's mainly trends and all that nonsense. But for me, if I was going to trade, I think it's interesting how a market reacts to news. All right, so let's say. Let's say next week's news about the US economy is really bad, or it's worse than expected. Let's say growth is expected to be, 2%, and it comes in at 1.85%, but markets don't care. That shows you that markets aren't worried about the economy. So I'd be a buyer of that. If we saw the market do something opposite to what we were expecting it to do, that's what I'll use for giving us a clue. The same way, when we looked at that stock that had gapped, if you see a market, I don't know what Netflix has done, but let's try and take a quick look at it. I've got no idea if that's going to be a good example or not. No, it's not. Let's say Netflix came out with poorer than expected subscriber numbers, but the market didn't sell off. Then I would take that as a buy signal that the market, wasn't too concerned about the poorer subscriber numbers. But I don't sit there and try and trade off news. I'm just reading this PMI thing. So the expectation was, it's the Purchasing Managers Index. The expectation was 52.8. It came in at 53.5. So better than expected. So suggests business activity looks to be good. So there we go. That's the PMI. So thanks for that, whoever mentioned that. Can we look at Tesla? Yeah, Tesla. They cut their car prices again, didn't they? This week, I think, Tesla. What would you do? What would you do on Tesla? So they had earnings this week. Did they have earnings? What were the earnings like? So reported 0.85. The estimate was 0.846. So they were pretty much in line with expectations. Revenue was slightly lower. Blah blah blah. I think the aggressive trade. There's nothing really jumping out at me. The aggressive trade for me is be a buyer. Should we do that trade as well? Let's do that trade. We'll be a buyer of Tesla. We'll say the market's overreacted to this week's earnings in Tesla. There's the gap down, okay? So the earnings came out after the market shut on Wednesday. Tesla stock was trading at 180, and then they opened yesterday at 166, and they've stabilised. Let's say I'm going to take the view Tesla has overreacted. So I'm going to be a buyer at 163 and go 150 on a stop loss. Let's do that trade. Hold on. Let's find Tesla. TSLA. Tesla. Okay, let's... I've completely forgotten, of course, what I said I was going to do. 150 I said, didn't I? 150 for a stop. And I'm risking 50, aren't I? So if I buy 5, or buy 4, so I'm going to buy 4 at 163.96, blah, 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 whatever it is. Stop at 150, margin 105, place a trade. Okay, there we go, done. And I'm up on both trades, look at that. I've made a massive, about 30 pence. I think it's interesting. I think it's a short-term trade, Tesla. That trend clearly has run out of steam. It's interesting to see, is it going to pull back into the range, back to 190? But nothing too exciting. Apart from that, I don't think. Uranium. I can never get this up, actually. You're saying Uranium Royalty Core. It's not looking very good, is it? That is just weak, isn't it? Whatever they are, Uranium Royalty Core. So where have they gone from? They've gone from November 21, nearly $6 to whatever it is, 180. So the trend looks like that. I would be a seller still. So pretty weak, hitting a new low for the downtrend today. Uroi. So yeah. BTI. Who's BTI? BTI. British American Tobacco. Is that the US listing of British American Tobacco? I've got shares in these. Let's look at the UK listing. I'm still long British American tobacco. I should have got out before now, to be honest. So yeah, I've given back too much profit on those. But so I've got it in my ISA. It'd be nice if we got a rally up to like 31.50. I could dump them. But that trend is down, isn't it? Since June of last year. I've messed up on that. It's not paying attention. I think I did buy them in here somewhere. Nice dividend payer, but absolutely the trend has turned on those. But in the short term, we could well see an oversold rally back up to maybe 31.50. Let's see. Look at the OPEC news. It spiked the oil price, and since then the price is getting driven down. I would have to slightly disagree with you on that, because the spike on the OPEC news, if we're talking about that weekend cut, was here. That was the gap, and then we did have a lot of sideways, and it did move higher again. So it's only started falling over the last week. But yeah, I would have absolutely have sold into that spike and been wrong on that gap on the OPEC. But anyway. Everyone's expecting Tesla to drop prices again to support production. They're producing right now for months. What are your thoughts on the dollar against the South African rand? It's an interesting market. This, I haven't looked at this one for ages. Let's have a look. Let's have a look on the dailies. Because I remember the massive run up. When was that? A long time ago. 2011 through to 2016, a great trend. I don't know. I would say from a more medium-term point of view, I'd be a buyer of the US dollar on weakness. From a more short-term point of view, I don't know. There's nothing for me. There's probably nothing there at the moment, because again, we've just been for the last couple of months just been a bit stuck, haven't we? And these old highs are a bit of an issue, aren't they? So, yeah, it's a bit boring for me. I suppose if you wanted to go short the dollar against the rand, it's interesting up here with the stop above 1880 or something. But I'd much personally rather see a sell-off and buy the dip on that. Right, we're going to have to wrap it up there because I've got to do something at, now. So, as usual, to find out more about the training course, performance, all that stuff, go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. April 20 to use the money off voucher. Don't forget, there's a newsletter I send out if you go to the website. If you're not on the list for the newsletter, it's there somewhere on the homepage somewhere. There's a box down there, and I'll send the newsletter out this weekend. Hopefully it's quite interesting. And like I say, it's been a bit of a quiet week this week, but with all these earnings out next week, there's still I think some potential out there. We're seeing some volatility today anyway, in the last part of the week off those PMI numbers. Let's see what next week brings. Let's see what happens. But bit of a quiet couple of days. But we'll wrap things up there. Thanks for coming along. We'll do it all again. It's not a holiday next Friday, is it? We'll do it all again next Friday. Any questions, you can get in touch with me via the website. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, if you could subscribe and click the thumbs up thing, it all helps the algorithm, doesn't it? And that's it. So until next week, good luck with your trading and have a good weekend.